So, herzlich willkommen hier heute Abend zum Webinar Instroke und Endo-Self. Welcome for everyone to be here to this webinar Endo-Self and Instroke with Will Davis. I'm very happy to have him here, that we can talk about his work and concepts here. And yes, I'm very interested and curious to discuss with Will Davis his work, his very profound, innovative work in the modern body psychotherapy. And I know Will for now some decades. I learned him, I met him in the early 90s in Berlin and as a young student, and I followed for a really long time his work, and he was very much influencing my work, my later work also with babies, children and parents. So I say hello to Will Davis here, that you're here, Will, and that we have the opportunity to discuss your really profound work. I just want to say some stuff in advance for this meeting. We have a limit of people who can be there in the webinar, and it's around 65 people now and still people arriving. Please let your microphones out while we are talking. In the first part of the talk, we would have an open dialogue. It's a kind, not really an interview, it's more a talk together, an expert talk and dialogue about Will's work. And it will last around 60 minutes. And then we turn over to an open discussion with you people. And please make your notes and write it down what you have in mind. It would be good to first have a little flow for the questions, and for that Will can expand his ideas, and then we have time to discuss. Yeah. So if later on you want to say something, then you have to switch on your microphone. Now it's out, so we can't hear you even if you would shout very loud. So we can't hear you. Okay. That's it, and I will tape the whole session here so you can listen to it later, and we will put it into the YouTube channel so everyone later on can look to it, even if he or she has missed something. Good. So, hello Will, let's start. That's fine that you're here. And also for you, you could now open your microphone. You're the only one who should really open his microphone.
It's okay. You hear me
yes,
now?
Yes, that is fine. Okay, thank you. Yeah, Will,
well, I want to say thank you, Thomas, for doing this. I appreciate it very much. I hope that it's a benefit to everyone. Yeah.
I'm absolutely thinking that will be so. And I'm also very happy that we have this discussion after now you have published your book and the last in this year, and in this book here, Functional Analysis, and it's a collection of your work, and I think this is also a good basis for the whole discussion now. I really can recommend everyone to buy it and read it. So what I'm interested in to talk with you is the Instroke concept. I think it's a very, very basic understanding which is of importance for the body psychotherapy, and also to work with aliveness in general, and to understand how life is functioning. And you have really brought together many different ideas, and the collection of that you call the Instroke. So you were starting as a body-oriented psychotherapist. You were a Reichian psychotherapist. And so I would like to know, what is Instroke? What is the Instroke concept? What could you try to explain that to us?
It has to do with Reich's pulsation. So I think if the audience knows about Reich, he has his energy concepts. He says that there is a life force and it pulsates, it moves out and it moves back from periphery to center. In the classical Reichian work, the style I learned in what is called the radix work from Charles Kelly, the idea was to work with the outward, the so-called expansive or expressive movement. Reich talked about expansion, moving out from the center to the periphery and beyond, and then he talked about contraction, which was a movement back in. He said that expansion was pleasurable and contraction was anxiety. What I understood and what I changed was the idea that not all movements outward are expansive necessarily. This is what we saw working in body psychotherapy. People would try and shout or cry and even make physical movements, and they were constricted. So on the outstroke, on the movement outward, you had constriction. And then not all movements inward are contraction and produce anxiety. For example, you sleep at night. Hopefully you're not in an anxiety state. Half of your heartbeat is a contraction. Shouldn't be anxiety. Meditative states, self-reflective states, these should not be anxiety states. So the idea is it's not just a contraction and away from something, but using the term Instroke implies a moving towards something. And generally, it's deeper in contact with yourself.
So maybe it's good when you now describe the functions of the Instroke, that you go maybe back to your earlier observations. So when you worked in this expressive work, I understand you that you said, okay, this work had limits to bring it out, to deblock the organism, to express deep emotional stuff. I mean, there was part of it functioning very well, but here there were limits. So which type of clients, which type of people you couldn't really reach with that kind of work? I think you were writing a lot about that.
Okay, there's two themes. One is the limits of that style of work. And the second theme is, more specifically, which patients the work was not good with. Yeah?
Yes.
So for me, there's limits to the work as a style. And then I developed the Instroke concept originally specifically for certain types of character structures, which the term would be something like low energy people. These would be orals, depressives, maybe some types of schizoids, people who were, in that sense, contracted. The energy level seemed to be low. They were depressed. They couldn't maintain. They couldn't move out into the world. These were people who liked to stay alone, who spent more time reading rather than playing sports. And so, because the original model from Reich and what I learned in the radix was you had to start moving outward. Yeah. And this immediately activated the defense of these types of character structures. This is exactly what they don't want to do. It's exactly what they cannot do.
So it was hard for them, like people like an oral character structure, let's say when we take Reich's character analytic work, so they had a hard time to bring them into excitement, to charge them up in a way, taking their terms now. So what happened exactly? So what can you give us an image of that? What happens on the mattress?
Yeah, the mattress, you have to do some breathing, strong breathing. You have to do voluntary movements that the therapist tells you to do. A really better example is doing the tennis racket work, where people stand and they use a tennis racket to hit a pile of cushions. Mm-hmm. And especially if you worked in a group, well, this fit fine for certain character structures. Psychopaths, narcissists, really aggressive people, they like doing this. And this is what they do. And this is one of the limits of that work, because you're feeding into their character armor. Okay. Now the opposite, it was absolute terror for some of these so-called low energy people to get up in front of a group, start hitting and shouting. This was impossible for them to do. It's not like Reich pointed out, it's not that they were unwilling, they were unable to do it.
So then you started to change something. So you changed your focus, and that brought you more to this idea of gathering the people, bring them into the body. I mean, using the pulsatory model from Reich in a different way. So what was the first step? Did you discover it by accident, using, for example, the breathing in the beginning? So I'm curious, how did you do it?
Well, the first step was my own experience in the therapy.
Mm-hmm.
So I was young, I was strong, I was athletic, I was young and beautiful at the time. I could do all of these exercises and all of this stuff. It wasn't a problem physically. And I could do them in the group, for example, but it wasn't my style. I knew this, I felt this. So when I did this, I felt myself splitting off. I could act it out because it was expected of me. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I was aware I was distancing myself from this. And I knew, of course, this didn't make sense. It wasn't good therapy. But the thing that struck me was, and again, I had the good fortune to work with a trainer in the Radix organization. I used to go from Seattle down to Los Angeles, and I would do 5 days of therapy, 3 hours a day. And so it was continuous. And this theme of, yes, I would say to, yes, I can do this for you, but it has nothing to do with me. I'm not connected. She said, I'm so grateful to her. She said, what do you want to do? So I said, I want to spend more time with a little bit of breathing, with coming in, with gathering myself before I'm supposed to start coming out. So this was the original beginning of this. And then
so it was a very personal experience.
The personal experience. And then I worked with her. Again, I'm grateful she allowed me to do this and worked with me, supporting what I was doing. Then I started doing this with patients, exploring. And then I found that, one, it worked well with certain types of patients. And I'm a former part-time schizoid. So I had a lot more of those characteristics where I would hold myself back. I was contracted physically and emotionally. So I started using that, and I saw that this worked well. People were more comfortable. And then I started using it with all character structures. But now there's a little trick, because these other character structures, the psychopaths, the more aggressive, the hysterics, the narcissists, they like that expressive, so-called expressive outstroke. Now, if I start asking them to do the instroke, this attacks their defense immediately.
Yeah.
So it took a while, but still, schizoids like the instroke technique automatically. Other types like psychopaths and hysterics and so, they need more time to trust that, because if they stop acting out, they lose their identity.
Okay, so let's go on with that. So when you bring the patient more into the body through these kind of breathing techniques, what you started in the beginning,
yeah.
What happened to the people then? So you said it in your words. What happened to you? What were your therapeutic observations? A kind of silence coming inward. How can you explain to people what happens then?
So what I realized was, I need to make a side comment and then I come back, yeah? What I realized was, with the classic Reichian work, one of the problems, one of the contradictions with it is you would breathe and you would do exercises and you were to get the patient excited, charged up, yeah? The problem is, there's two problems. If you charge the person up more, the defense gets charged up more. So it gets stronger. So it's a no-win situation, yeah? And the second thing is, what I understood was, the reason people are blocking is it's already too much charge, too much excitement. I can't process this. So why add more?
Mm-hmm. So
Doesn't
that
make
is the
sense.
idea of these having too much and too low energy. So that is a very essential
Okay,
thing
the
that you
people,
say.
nobody had too little energy.
Yeah.
That's what I've discovered 45 years or something. I haven't found anyone who didn't have enough energy. Now, some had it more hidden away, of course. It was obvious in their behavior. So the idea was to get people, I changed the style of the Reichian work with the breathing. I changed it not to charge and excite, but just a light, soft abdomen breathing to get people more connected, centered into their center.
Mm-hmm.
So no additional energy, just connect the energy you have. And then one thing is that people also saw, oh, I'm contacting something that's dangerous for me. But then, which will come up later with the Kreiselwelle thing, we didn't keep going there. I would say to people, come back, come away from it. Let's talk about it. Where do you feel that? What does it feel like? What do I have here?
No, it's okay. We just have, wait a second. I make
All
them
right.
all silent again, and then you switch on your micro again. Please do that, yeah? Otherwise, all people, please switch off your microphone.
Okay.
Yes, fine. Go on.
All right. So what I saw with people, I was originally using this new breathing style, low charge, very quiet and very safe, soft kind of way. I was still interested in expression. And at the beginning, I was getting that. We would get less contracted expansion, less contracted expression. Throat stayed open, the movements were looser, the emotions came easier. Okay, that was good. But then what changed everything was sometimes people would breathe and they would get very quiet, and then a quietness would come in the room. And then I would sit there and wait and see. And then after a while, sometimes people would stretch and I'd say, how do you feel? They say, I feel wonderful. And then I would ask physically, emotionally, get it more clear, what is wonderful? I feel relaxed. I feel like I'm secure. And sometimes people would curl on the side into the so-called fetal position.
I just, I remember the first time when I saw your work, I have to maybe, it's good to add that. It was in 87 or 89 in Berlin in a big conference, in a Reichian conference, and you showed that video of this breathing style with working with the Instroke. And when I came more from the bioenergetic style of work and or more classical Reichian style, I was always looking, it was fascinating, but there was nothing happening in a way on the video. I said, what's going on there? It's so attractive and nothing is really going on. So nothing really to see. I mean, in the end, it came this big movement. What you say, it was still then a very deep vegetative reaction, but long-term, very, very deep silence. And I was smashing it. So,
yeah. And this was very hard to sit through because I had learned Gestalt work, which is very active. I had learned encounter group work. I was very directive. I learned the radix work, breathe, hit, shout, do all of this. It was very hard as a therapist to sit there and wait and see. Huh?
Okay. Yes, and I could imagine also when you developed it in the field of a very expressive work with Charles Kelly. I'm curious, what were the responses of all that people?
I'll tell you a story, okay, quickly. It was a training group in Los Angeles, outside Los Angeles. And by then I was developing this technique, and all the trainees, we were giving sessions to each other, and Kelly was supervising us. So me, I don't know, because I come from New York, I thought, well, I'm going to show him this. So I did this other session with this woman, like this style. Absolutely nothing happened. And the feedback, Kelly said, I'm not even going to supervise you, Will. This is the worst thing I've ever seen you do. The worst thing I've ever seen anyone do. Next day, we do the same thing. I do the same technique with a woman. It was absolutely beautiful. There was a wave quality, not all the contraction. She went into that wave quality. There was clear, open sound. And Kelly said to me later, and this disappointed me, Kelly said, I don't know what you did, but that was wonderful. And he never asked. He never asked.
Okay, interesting.
And
So I want to show maybe this chart. Maybe we can, it's a good moment to go over to this wave chart, and maybe kind of it's this relation between the inward movement work, the concentrative work of pulsation, and the more expressive work. And let's go back to this. Do you see this moment?
I saw it on the left. I saw the diagrams on the left on the screen.
So there it is. Wait a second. So we go there. So that is the dolphin thing.
Okay.
So maybe that is good to bring that in. What this idea is to bring in, and then afterwards having the strength of the living process.
Okay, so this is the change. This represents to me the change from the exciting, dramatic, expressive work where we see the dolphin on top. Very exciting, and it looks like a lot of fun. And to do that work often was a lot of fun, and to do those exercises. But at the same time, in the same system, what do we see below? We see something very calm. We see something very quiet, but it's very intense. And then also you see the curling. You can change in your mind the image a little. You see the wave. You see how the wave is breaking, it's curling. This is how it comes to the shore. If you're standing at the shore and this happens, you feel the force and the power of that. And then if you stand there, you feel the water going back out to the sea, and you feel the power of that gathering so it can do the next wave. And so this is the change. Both are there in that energetic system. The first classical Reichian work was the exciting dramatic work, but even Reich later spoke about, he would look out at the lake at Organon where he lived, and he saw the wind making all this excitement on the lake, but he knew that down below it was all quiet. He also used the image of a mountain range. You see all the peaks, all the high parts, and this looks very powerful and very impressive. But as he pointed out, each one of those peaks is sitting on a foundation. The foundation in the sea is where the lower dolphins are. And there, it's a wave quality. The energy moves in a wave, not in peaks and spikes.
So that brings us maybe to the next step of our talk. It is more about this quality. So the beginning was more this manifested pulsation. So
Exactly.
Working more, let's say, what you can observe, what you can see, for example. I mean,
Mostly what the person is living.
Yeah.
Their emotions, their relationships, their fears, any of it. Yeah. That's the manifested level. Yeah.
That's right. And then, but then you say, with this this description of this deeper wave thing, I mean, you changed your work more to more working with the, let's say, silent Instroke, even more going into this silence and of the work. So it's a second phase of the Instroke. So, and then you changed also the technique, more from the breathing style, more to the touching of the connective tissue, the points, and position work. Maybe.
Yes.
So talk about that. What was happening? What was the change of quality, and what did the clients then report in their functional change when you start working with that?
Okay, so the change came when I started using a technique from the physical therapies, from osteopathy. An American osteopath developed a thing called positional release. So it's a physical technique, and it fit in very well with the existing Instroke idea, because with the Instroke idea, the idea was to go in and see what's there. Okay. What this man Jones did, instead of manipulating the tissue of the patient in the osteopathic session, being active as the therapist to change the state of the tissue, which is what we typically did in the Reichian work by exercises and manipulation. Jones would take the contracted muscle and position it and do a gentle compression. So if the muscle was contracted, he would, in a way, compress it even more. And now the muscle gets to do what it wants to do, hold tight, protect, and be safe. And then when you release that, you get the opening. And Jones says his work went from the physical manipulation technique to the neurological. Messages were sent to the brain, it's okay. And he has a nice phrase. He says, we don't want to surprise the nervous system. Mm-hmm. And in the Reichian work, we were surprising the nervous system, the whole damn system, too many times. And so the system would resist this. So I adapted Jones's technique, thinking, oh, here's a good release technique. No different than breathing, no different than bioenergetic exercises. It would work on the muscles. The muscular armor, the classic example. What I found was, when I started doing that, people would lie on the mat, they didn't do any breathing. This technique, the way I adapted it, what I call points and positions now, it looks like shiatsu or acupressure. It's a light touch on certain points. And you don't look to manipulate the tissue. You just make a touch and you come away. Then people would just really drift off. They would go into some other state where the outside world and what I was doing became unimportant. They would go deeply in. And then and usually, not always, 90% of the time, nothing happened. The person didn't say anything. There was no emotion. There was no movement. And then at the end, we would talk a little. I would ask them how they felt. When it was effective, they always felt a sense of security, comfort, relaxing, stop thinking, relief, and so.
So maybe it's, when you describe that, it's always good to have a look on what is really going on. What is it, the kind of changing which is happening? I mean, when I understand it right, you said, I'm not adding energy. We are staying on that existential level of energy, but I changed the organization of the energetic process. Is that what you say? So that you, let's just say, the metabolism of the whole thing is being booted in a new way. So like a computer downstairs and bringing it up again. So yes, it's a very different way than the more quantitative understanding of bioenergetics.
Yes, but what's important for me to say, emphasize, is I am not making that change. The patient is doing the reorganizing. And then they come back out from the Instroke and they report it and they live it. But it is like that. If you wanted to show that antithesis diagram now, we could take a look at, maybe that might help some people.
That's fine. I do that. Because I think it's a very important and essential element that you say that we don't have to add anything. We just have to organize and see the whole thing and help the whole system to organize in a new and more smooth way. And
this is an important theme, for me.
Yes. So wait a second.
Thomas, I have to get a glass of water. I come right back. I'm sorry.
Okay. Wollen wir hoffen, dass der Referent wiederkommt. And would be maybe he's going into an Instroke and then it's finished. You could also write down in the chat maybe questions. I could integrate that. So if you have ideas or some questions for Will.
Hey, I'm back. Sorry.
Okay, fine, great.
So
I just said to the people that they can use the chat to put in this and that, so questions or ideas, and I could integrate it now, and later on we discuss it deeper. Yeah.
Okay.
So let's go back maybe to this chart.
Yeah. So this is the classic drawing from Reich. Yeah, psyche and soma, and then at this level down here, can you see this? Can you see my arrow?
Yes, yeah. Can you see it? Okay. Yeah.
So down here you have, before everything splits into psyche and soma, here you have basic functioning, this one single arrow, and you have the energy source. Yeah. So the idea, the classic idea in Reich is you have to bring everything up. This is the classic expressive model. Now, really what it should be, there should be a diagram here to indicate the Instroke, where you can work psychically or somatically and come down to a deeper level. Yeah? Up here, we used that phrase before, the psyche, soma, emotions, the level that people live in daily life. We call it the manifested level. But we know, of course, there's things that are happening below, the so-called unconscious. We can use it in general now to say that. And we know also that Reich was very interested on the vegetative level. So we could say the Instroke is bringing people back down to the vegetative level. And then the sympathetic, parasympathetic is getting back in a better balance. And this produces this more calm state, the senses of security, etc. So
could we say, Will, say that now what's a lot of discussion in the trauma therapies and in the recent research in that field is now coming to a point where Reich was studying the vegetative nervous system, and which is more on this level. I don't know if you see my arrow here.
I do. It's good.
Yeah? So that is this level. It's a psychophysiological regulation. But what you say in your work with the Instroke, I mean, you're touching that level too, but in a way the formation and the organization is still going deeper into the body.
Okay.
Is that right?
So, yes.
Because that is the point which normally is not discussed anymore.
See, my model is bottom up, not top, not top down, but bottom up. So you have the cognitive neuromuscular, which is mostly psychotherapy, verbal work. And then you have, it comes down and it gets into the physical body, okay. And then you, like you said, the vegetative. But then earlier nervous system is the enteric nervous system, right? Mm-hmm. So earlier life forms don't have a vegetative system, but they have the enteric, which is around the digestive system, okay? And then I'll introduce something that's probably new for most people, is the idea that there is a communication system that in the body, in any body, that is non-neural. And it's plasmatic, connective tissue. And this is where experience and sensation happen. Mm-hmm. And then these experiences, sensations are informing the enteric, and then the vegetative, and then the cognitive neuromuscular levels.
Okay, that is the plasmatic level, or even the energetic level, functional level. So.
Yeah, and as Reich pointed out, one second, Reich pointed out, nerves only carry impulses. They don't generate them. So whether it's neuromuscular, cognitive, central nervous system, whether it's vegetative, enteric, where are these impulses coming from that are being carried? This is the question. So,
maybe I would like to add one question, because you're very much stressing the point of the bottom-up model. But I have to say, I experienced your work for many years, and I haven't experienced in that time someone who was more precise cognitively than you were in your work. So it was something in your whole concept I would say, is a very, very precise cognitive model to embed the manifestations, the changes, the evaluations. So how does that come together? For me, I would say it is a very important thing what you're doing in your therapy, but I don't think it's so much spoken out in the theory itself, from my understanding at least, that kind of work, how you make models with your clients to get us to understand that change so that they can contain it in the daily life. So I think this is a very important point, or not?
Okay. Years ago, Heike Boel, some of you may know her, she said to me, you know, Will, you don't talk about it, but really what was important for me in working with you was the verbal work. So we have the points and positions physical technique, and then we have a certain style of verbal work. And as far as I know, most therapies don't teach a style of verbal work. You're just supposed to talk to the patient, and you're supposed to talk about this theme or this thing is more important. Okay. We teach 9 different types of verbal interventions, depending on the patient, the relationship, where the therapy is. You can use verbal work in different ways. And so, for example, we use what we call naming. Somebody says, oh, I feel better. Okay, what does better feel like? Well, I feel more free here. And maybe they touch a part of their body. Well, what does that freedom feel like? Is it on the surface? Is it deeper? And then, so we're getting them into the body and we're getting them more clear what their experience of themselves at that moment is. So this is one part where we do a lot of cognitive work. It is through the mind and verbal. The other part that's very valuable is we don't like to do a lot of what classically would be called interpretation. This means that we do what we call creating functional models. So that lower part of the chart we just saw, this is the functional level. And the idea is that there are uniform rules, laws, regulations on how the energy functions, how the life force functions. And it can manifest in many different forms. So I'll give you an example of a functional model. A patient comes in and she says, oh, my back hurts me very much, my lower back. And I say, do you know this? Is this something new? Well, I know it from many years ago, but I haven't felt it for 20 years. And then she says, I think it's because things are moving too fast. I don't want to move. So this means my back, the meaning of it all is my back is stopping me from moving. Okay? This is what I would call a psychological interpretation, what Wright calls psychologizing the somatic or the biological. Okay, could be correct, but very often it isn't. Then I said to her, so you don't want to move, but you told me last time that after 50 years, you're going back to the town and to the house where you were sexually abused as a 5-year-old. You're going to get on a bus and travel 14 hours to go there and do this. And you haven't been there in 50 years. This sounds to me like someone who's moving. Mm-hmm. This is a model. This is functioning. She's moving. What it all means and what it's all about, it's important. But first you need to understand the functioning. And then I suggested, maybe as part of the functional model, the back is in pain, not because it's gotten more stiff, but because it's loosened, because you are moving inside and outside. And so you feel the tension that has been in that back for the last 20 years, it comes alive again. I don't know if it's correct, but there's a way to look at it. Yeah? And so sometimes I offer 2 or 3 models to a patient, and I ask them, which one feels the best to you?
But that is a very, very shaping work you're doing. I mean, let's say, to change of using the eye segment, I would say. It is the change of perspective. And let's say it's a better shape of the eye using your eyes and your inner eyes and the outer eyes.
I would say the inner eye as much as the outer eye.
But
it makes people reflect on themselves, which is, of course, the whole Instroke on the verbal level. Our whole verbal technique there's no difference to me between touching and talking. You can do either or both, and when they work well. They do the same thing. They bring people more in contact with themselves.
Okay. Reich was, in this late work, was underlining the point that his work, the organ therapy, which was a next step in his psychotherapeutic career or development, was not anymore psychotherapy. It is a biotherapy. It is. So where would you say is your work? Where's your position in that field? Because what I see is you took that style and brought it back into field of psychotherapy. So where are you?
Wait a minute. I have some good notes. I have to find these notes here from Reich, huh? But this fits right in. Where are they? Well, yeah. So James Strict, you know him. He wrote the book on Reich, recent book about Reich. Yeah. Yes. It's called Reich Biologist.
Yes.
Huh? Okay. And he quotes Reich and says, I am to begin with a natural scientist, not a psychologist, not a psychoanalyst. I went into the field of psychiatry as a natural scientist. This interest was dictated primarily by the problem of energy. Okay. So I am a Reichian. Reich declares himself biologically oriented. So my work is biologically oriented. But I would say more organismic oriented, which includes all the different facets, not just the lungs and the veins and the muscles. It's the whole system. Yeah. And when we go back to that diagram of Reich's antithesis, we see psyche and soma have a meeting point. This is the point. This is organismic. That's the way I understand biological. Mm-hmm. So, and this is functional, and functioning always includes the psyche. Function includes everything. Mm-hmm. Includes psychotherapy, and includes talking about your mother and why she did this. It's all there. Psychotherapy does not include the functional. Okay. And Reich was very clear his work was not psychotherapy.
But you're still working in the field of psychotherapy, and you're discussing it also in psychotherapy.
I could start my own association, the Will Davis Association of Functional Analysis, and be the only member. I belong to the European Association of Bodypsychotherapy, so I can talk to somebody.
No, it's fine. It's fine to me, but because I like this idea that so that is something where I would say you took the functional, energetic, laid work from Reich, but you combined it with a humanistic psychology, with a humanistic understanding, and I see it's a very deep change in the whole understanding and perspective of therapeutic process and relationship, and I think that is a very big qualitative change. It's not the same as we saw it in Reich's work.
Okay, but you have to know, Thomas, Reich was a big influence on the humanistic movement in the 50s.
Yes.
He was, because he would say things like, you cannot ask a lame man to dance. They're not resisting the therapy. They're not resisting the therapist. They just can't do it different. It had this humanizing quality, and they took a lot from him. So I see it as a continuation. Reich brought a human quality. Reich offered to psychoanalysis the idea that the drives are relational, that the instincts and the movement towards contact and sexuality and that deeper state, the way he described it, they completely missed all of that. Now, relational psychoanalysis goes all the way back to 1912, Sabine Spielrein's article to try and justify that drives are relational. Reich explained all of that. This is the humanistic quality. So I see it as I do emphasize that. I see myself as a humanistically oriented therapist, but I find that all over Reich, everywhere also.
Okay, I'm fine with that. But it's good to express it. I just would say maybe it is like Reich changed from psychoanalytic work to sexual economy and ergonomy, which was a qualitative change. It was a continuum from there to here, from here to there, but it was a very deep qualitative change from fluid to gas, and or let's say from ice to fluid. And now I would say the work you're doing in that field is again, I see it as a very deep qualitative change, although there is a continuum. So that's what I see. You
I
always
think
say, I do what Reich did all time. Okay, it's just what Reich did, and it's all what Reich found already. I would give a little bit more credit for that. That's the only thing.
thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, let's come to the next point. That is the other part of our discussion. So working with this Instroke process, with this function of the gathering and concentration of the life force, is bringing up some very essential themes around the self. So you say the person is not withdrawing from environment, it's going towards something. So, and there is something. So it brought you to the whole interest to the self concept. Let's go on with this term Endo-Self. What is that? Why you use that term, for example?
Okay. The first thing I made this term, you know, endo, of course, means endogenous, rising from within. So the idea of it is that there is a subjectivity from the very beginning. It's not dependent on relationship. This subjectivity engages relationship and then gets developed further. Fine. So from the Instroke, I became more interested in, and specifically from what patients were saying, what patients were feeding back to me. They were saying, well, this is happening and that is happening, and I had to make some sense of it. One person said, well, with these sessions, it's like I put on a parachute and I begin the descent. Another woman said at the end of the session, I had an appointment with myself. A very good one. A man came to the session and he said, in almost the whole hour driving here, I was crying in the car. He had separated from his wife and children. He had given up his work. Everything was really changing in his life, turmoil, and it wasn't always easy. And he said, but right before I got here, I stopped crying because I realized someone cared for me. So of course, here I am, Mr. Wonderful, nice transference, okay. But I've learned to ask stupid questions, and I said, who cares for you? He said, myself. This to me is very profound. Another woman said, I feel such a presence in the absence of myself. How am I to understand this? And these type of self-referential, profound statements, I never heard in all the other different styles of therapy I did. People would just sit up and tell me this. So I had to pay attention to it, and I had to start modeling what is going on here. Okay. So one of the things that you had sent me was, is this Reich's biological core? Yeah. Well, there's a lot of terminology. There's a lot of suggestions from many different types of psychotherapies of something like this Endo-Self, the biological core. Bion had a thing called the O state, which is a being state. Of course, we had Maslow's being states. Carl Rogers had this expression, you get to a place where all the facts are friendly. So many people suggesting. So what I wanted to do was, can I elaborate and structuralize what people have been hinting and suggesting for so many years. So the Endo-Self is a subjectivity that exists before relationship. It has a quality of, when people go to this state, let's say they go down on that chart that we had before, you find certain qualities, certain characteristics that people report a little different, but one is, it's familiar. I know this. Even though I haven't felt it, or I don't remember ever feeling it, I know this feeling. People report a security. People report a coming home. I feel like I'm coming home. There's a very realistic, non-judgmental quality when people get to this state. A woman said, I love myself beyond the good and the bad. I know sometimes I'm good, I know sometimes I'm bad, but I'm still all right. I'm still a good person. even though I do things wrong. These are the qualities that when people get to this state, things are more simple. People don't bother with all of this mental elaboration things. It's not that it's perfect, but it's a lot better world.
But can we say that what you describe is this being state coming down, 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 is this whole function deeper down in the organism where everything gets very silent and connected, self-connected. But I'm just interested still in the terms, like Reich said, the biological core, but isn't the very important point that you found a term, a category to describe the subjective aspect of the biological core. So it's like a primary consciousness where we could say, okay, this is the way we experience that deep life energy, life force in ourselves from the beginning, let's say conception on.
See, subjectivity. It's a living system responding to the environment. So something in there, and at conception, it's only plasmatic.
Yes,
but it can still respond.
But that is important because Reich wasn't talking in that terms. What I see, this kind of subjectivity in his work and the role of this subjectivity, that is something you added to the whole thing.
Because I elaborated that, yeah.
I think it's a very important thing because in the end, he was very much talking about the objectivity of the life force and life energy. And that is for me also a psychic aspect. Let's say it's connected to the life energy, but it's the subjective psychic element of experiencing the life energy and life force. Would you agree?
See, absolutely.
That's the reason why I think it's important.
One of the reasons I developed the Endo-Psychic Self is so that psychotherapists would listen to me.
Yes.
So I didn't just talk about all this energy mumbo jumbo. Huh? I tried to find a language to come in from what you're saying. I'm in this other position. I'm working on this deeper level, and I'm trying to find a way to communicate with people that don't usually talk in these terms. Huh? My work includes their models. I would like their work to include my model also. So I'm trying to make a bridge.
So bringing back this more organismic self-understanding into more this more psychotherapeutic world of self-theory. So I see there's a connection, a dialogue. Okay. And so I'm interested to another point. So when you talked about some aspects like the clients are reporting. So how they reported this induced self experience. But there's another thing that you say, okay, that is important thing. We have our first relationship with ourselves, and it's a new perspective on the relation between self and object. And the whole Endo-Self concept changes the interrelation between self and object in a very profound way, because you say the self is creating the object, and it's really modeling the environment. Let's talk about that. It's a very essential another thing.
I think the role of the other is overemphasized. I'm not saying that the role of the other is not important. It's essential. It's necessary. But what I go along with surprisingly, what the psychoanalyst Andre Green says. The other only reveals the relational drive. It gives an opportunity for the subjective, the self, to make contact and elaborate itself. But the basic idea is there's an expression that I got from a guy who was writing about cooking. He says, it's not what you eat, it's what you digest. Okay? So any therapist knows you could have the best intentions, but the patient doesn't feel understood by you. Anybody who's been in a love relationship, they leave you. Yeah? Why is that? Is it just the intention of the object and what the object is doing? No, it's the qualitative experience of the subject that determines what happens, not what the object does, what the subject receives, not what's transmitted. And this is especially important in touch therapy, body psychotherapy. I can touch a patient. One person will feel as aggressive. I can do the same points and positions with another patient, and they'll feel cared for. I don't think I'm doing anything different.
Okay, so but let's have a look to the early relationship. So that, you know, that's a field where I'm very much working in. So we have there, I mean, what we see there and observe there very much is, let's say, the baby and the infant, which is doing what you're saying. So if the baby gets into better positioning, in a better pulsatory process, and is more in the state of Instroke, so it's more with itself, we see that the co-regulator, which is, if we are able to, that the co-regulator is able to stay in a more self-connected position and is able to establish in a way a relational or resonance field, I would say definitely the process to be with itself, to reach this Endo-Self point of in the baby is easier. You would agree or not?
Absolutely. This is why I like how you emphasize that in your work with parents and babies. Yeah.
But the point is, it also means, I agree with what you're saying, that the point that the inner force, which is reaching out, and that I think is the point you want to stress, the reaching out into the world, what the baby takes in is not the stuff what someone is giving the baby, it's
right.
more what the baby is taking from outside inside.
Exactly.
But it's, you would say so. And the point was, I'm always hanging there with the co-regulator, because we are working a lot with the co-regulator in our work, let's say in the emotional first aid, to improve, say it in Reichian terms, the pulsatory regulation in the co-regulator. And that is creating a resonance field which makes it easier for the baby to do what it wants to do.
Exactly. I agree. It improves tremendously the possibility that the baby will receive what's being transmitted. Caring, loving, protection, security, and so on.
Okay.
I keep talking?
No, wait a second. There's someone who's has the microphone on. So, okay. Yeah, that I think this is a very, very essential discussion about the role of the Endo-Self. Maybe we can have this one image again, and then we stop maybe and go back to the people.
Okay.
And have a little discussion. Wait a second. Here we see this, what your points and position technique with a client. And there's the positioning, what you were talking before. So, but, oops, it should be there. We had that. This one we want to have. So, okay, these are the representations of the endo-psychic self. So maybe we can, I'm curious what happened when this aspect, this deepening, this self-connection is being established and is with the patient, what then happens on the function, psychic and psychosomatic functioning level. So maybe we could go back to that, this change, the experience of change in the self-perception.
Okay, I don't know if this is the right model. The only way I can understand it now is that you have this change on the most primary, on the tissue level, plasmatic level. You can work, I work through the connective tissue. This is another change I made from the radix Reichian work. It's not muscular armor, it's the connective tissue that needs to be paid attention to. And so somehow, and I don't really know how, I use an energy model. I say that the energy moves towards the core and towards the center. You don't have to believe in the energy, but you see this phenomena where people go deeply in, nothing happens on the outside, and then they come out and they, for example, have completely rearranged a primary object representation without any new information, without any new input. This one man, I did the classic one, the first one I really saw it, 9 sessions in a week with him. He said nothing for 8 sessions. At the end, the 9th session, he starts crying. At the end, I ask him, anything to say? He says, I just realized that my stepmother loved me. I never thought that she loved me. So this is a real phenomena of how is this possible? Now, I have a way to describe it. I don't know if it's the correct way, but I think through this Instroke, whether it's the energy or whether it's something else, the tissue itself is changing. The person's experience of themselves is changing, and then they reorganize. A good model for me is the animal that lives in the sea, the crab. Yeah, it has this hard shell, very dangerous looking, very scary. Every couple of years, these animals, any of them, they have to go and hide. The shell becomes soft, completely soft. You can take, I just had some recently, you capture them and you cook them and you eat the shell and everything. It's so soft, yeah? So this is this Instroke. This is this destructuralization that has to happen for this crab to grow bigger, yeah? They understand it's a chemical phenomena, okay. Something like this is happening where the original structure the person has been living with is now being reorganized. It's destructuralized and then reorganized inside by the person itself.
And what does that say, for example, that the therapist has to nurture or to, let's say, be a good enough mother or father on a relational level? Let's say.
Yeah, sure. This is what you said earlier, Thomas, with your work specifically, but it applies. You create this atmosphere. This is the humanistic model. A tree knows how to be a tree. All that it needs is an environment that doesn't at least interfere. And
yeah, but isn't it a change? I mean, the one is when you have the relational process between a mother and a child in the beginning, and later on in the therapy with an adult working with these inner objects, for example, your work is really taking a very different position. It's saying it's not the play field that the therapist is changing, like saying the careful one is really repeating the old stuff, and now you get all the caring and all the holding and all the bonding, which is changing you. It's more the change in the therapeutic work, which is reorganizing the energetic process, and that allows you to take in more what is there, let's say the caring aspects in the world, so you can take in more.
If the person has reorganized, then they can take in those caring aspects. I mean, all of us know as therapists, you've said something to a patient, perfectly clear, perfectly right. They didn't even hear it. 2 years later, they say, oh, now I understood what you meant or what you were saying when you said this and this. They weren't ready to hear it. Okay. So you can put it out, but somehow something has to be changed inside the person to receive it, to trust it, to explore, to make it possible. And yes, the relationship with the other can be critical in that, absolutely.
You said always, I don't do mothers. And,
I don't do mothers. I still say that.
Okay, I like this. I mean, that's repeating something. I'm not the better mother on a, maybe you're on a transference level, but that's not the issue in the work. It's the essential aspect of your work. So.
Right. And it's not about your relationship with your mother. It's about your relationship with yourself, which your mother had something to do with. That's for sure. But let's leave her out of it because she didn't do a good job the first time. So let's not include her again.
Okay, I think right. Now nearly at the end, I mean, we could go on and on about this different things, but I think this is something which is very important, and your work in relation to other work like Winnicott's work and Peter Fonagy's work, relational work, I think that you pointed out it very nicely, that there's a different aspect you try to.
I'm glad you see this, Thomas. Thank you. I feel appreciated. Thank you.
I think it's a good moment now to go to open up the round and collecting some questions, and some people, I think they had already written down a question, like Günther Reisert
Right.
asked you, would you say that there is a strong relationship between the structural level, for example, along the psychiatric OPD model, and the effectiveness of points and position? Is it possible, for example, that you treat severe types of acute psychotic patients for the aim to raise their structural level, that she becomes repaired for other methods? So I think he tries to speak about the point, is your work creating structures that they could also do other more what is it? Confrontive therapies? Maybe is that what you want to say? I don't know. Günther, say something. It's a little bit unclear what you want to know.
All right. I try to I try to say it in German. It's a little bit easier for me. Yeah. Sehr schwere psychiatrische Diagnosen sind ja oft nicht zugänglich für Standardtechniken oder Psychotherapiemethoden, die sehr sprachorientiert sind, egal ob das jetzt Rogers oder Moreno oder Acting Method sind. Die sind ja auf einem ganz, ganz niederen Strukturniveau, jetzt, wenn man das psychiatrische OPD-Modell nimmt. Würdest du sagen, Will, dass die Points und Positions eine sehr indiziert sind, um das Strukturniveau zu verbessern und anzuheben, damit diese Personen dann für andere Zugänge, für gesprächsorientierte, verhaltensorientierte Zugänge überhaupt erst ermöglichen?
Okay, hold on. So what he says is your work maybe helpful for people who have a very low structural level, like quite high and severe psychiatric problems, and where people normally can't use the classical psychotherapy styles, verbal work, and like say Moreno work, like psychodrama and this stuff like that, so that you prepare this even more severe problems and people with the severe problems to become able to go more in this type of works where they deal with these other styles of verbal aspects and so. It's a preparation, or it's a more low level for a low structural process.
So we don't have a lot of experience. We don't have enough experience with this type of thing, but I think yes, because as you said, these types of patients, they have not structuralized the psychic realms and the different aspects of it. But this idea of the endo-self says there is an undamaged self. There is this system that is still intact, that knows how to do this given the right opportunity. And what we do with the Instroke, rather than deal with the dysfunctional aspect, the unstructured part, and try and work with that, help them to structuralize. What we do when our work goes the best, it's not always this way, we get to help the person to get to the endo-self state. They start feeling secure, start getting confidence, and they know they have a spontaneous sense of what they should be doing. So I worked with a woman, just briefly. She was the patient of another therapist in Italy. And this woman was on medications with depression and panic attacks. She had a body to me that fit perfectly. It was a formless body. It was sort of androgynous. She was a 35-year-old woman, no relationship, no work, living at home with her parents and her grandparents. No life, really. And I'm not criticizing her, just the reality.
Yeah.
I did only 1 or 2 sessions with her, but it was very interesting what she said at the end of one. She stands up, she looks sort of out the window. She wasn't even talking to me. She says, I realized I always wanted to be somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is the idea of somewhere in there, there is still this sense of self that knows itself, that knows what to do. So the simple answer is then, yes, I think there's a lot of potential, but certainly we need more experience with it.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, fine. Becomes my idea starts from the vision that especially the severe psychiatric patients have very bad Aussicht development, diagnosis to be treated with the standard procedures in psychotherapy, and because it could be a very sensible combination that I mean, it's clear also after that these very fine results you told us, these patients have a long way. It's always a process to have a better life. But
könnte,
das ist the
okay,
basis.
Unterbrech mal ganz kurz. Danke für die Frage, ja. Also ich glaube, der Punkt ist jetzt erstmal soweit geklärt, oder? Ist in Ordnung, oder?
Ja, also die Kombination hat mich interessiert.
Alles klar, okay. Ist in Ordnung, wenn wir, when you want to go on with that, Will? Otherwise,
no,
we would
I
change.
wanted to know, what is the last thing you said? The combination of?
The combination.
Of the two therapies. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Good.
One person's, one psychiatrist's writings I find hopeful is this guy, Thomas Fuchs from Heidelberg University.
Yeah, the phenomenologist.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the way he talks about, I forget the German, the two different types, the Körper and he has, anyway, I find it very close to what Reich was talking about with schizophrenia.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, there's thank you, Günther. There's another question from Bettina, and she asked if you could talk a little bit more about the style of talking. You were talking about the naming, no
Right.
interpretation. So what are the other styles? She's curious about the verbal work. Maybe what is about the verbal work?
Our verbal work is a synthesis of Gestalt work, what I learned early on from the Gestalt approach of present moment experience, and is also very grounded in the body. So you would see Pearl's work or see other people work. He was very interested. He wasn't interested so much in the content and the meaning. He was interested in who are you right now? What is this? Why are you making that movement? Or what does that feel like there? Or where do you feel it? So we have very much, where do you feel this in the body? And then the hard part to teach therapists is to ask more and more. Where in the body is it? What does it feel like? Is it heavy? Is it light? Does it have color? Does it, to get people more focused? Okay, this is very Gestalt thing. And then it's also very similar to the focusing technique. And then the third part is Carl Rogers, the centered on the patient. Patient says something, we do a lot of paraphrasing and feeding back when we work with the patient. Again, sometimes some interpretation, sometimes some comments, sometimes a personal comment, okay. Now, we have these different techniques. So we talk first to gather information, general sort of thing that you do in any psychotherapy setting. Where do you work? What do you do? Where do you live? You married, children, you know, maybe history comes up, okay. But we're more interested in how the person is feeling at the particular moment and how they feel about that feeling. Not so much what it means, not so much what it has to do with the other person. So we do interventions do maybe more towards a focusing thing for a while. Where is that? How do you feel it? And then this sometimes mobilizes the person. It touches or moves something in the person. So then we stay with it further. So now we're mobilizing. Other times we might bring it back to doing what I call this modeling. Okay, there's a lot of information on the table here. You talked about this, you talked about that, you talked about these different things. Is there a way for us to see that there is a red thread? I always see these models like a constellation. Over there is one celestial body, over there is another, here's another. Where, is there a center where one, it's not one causes the other to move, but they're in relationship to each other? And there's a dynamic quality. So we do the verbal work in this sense also. And then the naming we do. We also do acknowledgement. This I got from Carl Rogers specifically. Someone says something, someone reports something. It's very important that the person sees that this change has happened. A lot of times they don't. So I'd say, what I hear you saying is, this is an important thing. This is the first time that you said what you felt and that your husband heard you. Yeah, okay. So there's different approaches to come to it. And then a lot of times we have to just let the patient talk and talk because they just need to escape. So you let them escape. And you know that what they're saying isn't going anywhere. It's like when you're fishing and the fish pulls the line out. You have to, okay, you let it run, and then you slowly have to bring it back into contact again. So we have a lot of these different modalities that we use.
Okay. Can I add maybe to this verbal thing another aspect? So what you're saying is that you're focusing very much on the body sensations or naming the body sensation, so focusing on the how other people experiencing, and that you're rooting and grounding them in this sensational level. So where's the difference? Where would you see the difference of your work, for example, to a somatic experience from Levine? I mean, he's doing a lot of verbal work and focusing on the body sensation to modulate the arousal level, for example. What would you say? Is it the same way how you use it, or is it exactly this more perspective and the modeling you're doing on this more functional, in what you described in the functional chart, which is a different aspect? Do you see? Can you compare that or give us an idea?
I think that most of these other techniques, Levine and others, at least what I've seen, Pat Ogden, I recently saw Pat Ogden.
Yeah.
They work, supposedly it was trauma work with a man. A video I saw a couple of years ago at a Congress. Very good work. But it wasn't anything functional.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a good Gestalt session in a way where she got the person focused, and he felt very sad, and it had to do about his father.
Mm-hmm.
My work I don't do fathers, I don't do mothers, I don't do fathers. It wasn't on the functional level. It was helpful, it was good work, there was absolutely nothing wrong with it. It was touching to see.
So
but it's still psychological.
So that means, I mean, like let's say psychosomatic experience, or also the Atkins sensomotoric psychotherapy. I mean, they working a lot with this psychophysiological excitation, so that and sensing on that. But you say these styles are bringing it back to the theme level, and what you want to go deeper in this more functional level to bring it in more and more inward. Is that what you say?
I'll give you an example. I'll try and make it simple. So we do eye exercise. We do some specific 2 different exercises. So I'm doing one exercise with this woman. And she is looking at me. And we do it's a little exercise I don't want to explain now. So we take a pause and I say, well, anything to say about the exercise? She said, I saw the coldness of my mother's eyes in your eyes. Oh, good. We could work with this, couldn't we? And wait a little more, and but I stayed with more experiential. Where did you feel that? Where was it? Was it in the eyes? Was it behind the eyes? And so on. Okay. Then we come back and we do the exercise again. Then I ask her, anything to say from this one? She said, I could see the coldness in your eyes, Will. So now we've changed from the past and the mother to the present and to me. This is a change, right? I'm not interested in the mother's eyes and my eyes. I could understand her saying my eyes are cold. They have this pale blue and everything. It's fine. Maybe my eyes are cold. Okay, we talk a little. We do it a third time. She reports, I felt the coldness in my eyes. Herself. Not a mother, not Will, but her. Oh, it's me again, isn't it? That's what I'm interested in. And then we can focus on that. What is that coldness? Where do you feel this coldness? What is your coldness for you? Whatever. You know?
Okay, thank you.
So it's not about the past. It's not about the other, the mother or Will. It's about me, what I'm doing with myself right now. And of course, projecting it out.
Okay, maybe
All right.
some other questions. Yeah, we have some minutes left. Maybe there are other questions from people. We have some minutes to go.
If
Switch
possible.
on your micro. Yeah, please. Luca.
I am Luca Panseri from Italy.
Ciao, Luca.
Ciao. And I want to thank you for this wonderful interview. Thomas, really, I appreciated a lot your questions, really, and resonated a lot with the last part, because I was trained as a relational psychotherapist. And so for me, this functional is a sort of revolution, because I was trained to be a mother or a father good enough. And so I'm struggling a lot. I'm still not completely convinced, but I think that Will gives us something revolutionary. But the difficulty for many therapists is to get out of the way, because I think that there is a sort of narcissistic gratification in being a good father or a good mother. And this is the problem.
It's nice said. Really great. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Will, you want to say something to that?
Yeah, one thing, Luca, maybe you could be an uncle instead of a mother or father. Try that. But the other thing, I wanted to bring it up earlier, but I'll bring it up now because of what you say, that this working with the Instroke and this type of understanding where it's self-regulating and so, it changes the therapeutic relationship.
Yeah.
It changes the role of the therapist. Thomas's description of how he works with the parents of babies, it's in that direction. Thomas works more in that direction, but it does bring up these issues of what is my role, and especially my own narcissistic issues, or do I have to know everything? And in functional analysis, with the functional models, what's so good is they're wide open and they can adapt. So I don't have to know everything, and it's a great relief also.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I know enough. The hell with it. You know?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luca. So is there anything else we want to discuss and you will have to say?
I want to say thank you very much for this, Thomas. Again, you were very responsible for the book itself. I appreciate this. You've pointed out that my work has some unique qualities. Yes, I like that. I like you point it out. I like you see it. But it also creates a certain almost loneliness, separation, which is difficult for me to process sometimes. And so that you put the energy in, you know my work for years, you could have just moved on, but instead you came back, you asked for this for the book. I appreciate it. And I especially appreciate what you do now. And of course, the people participating. And I hope that it's, as I said earlier, of some benefit and use. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Will. And I'm really happy to spread the word, and really that this work I think is really essential, and it's really worth studying, especially studying that.
Thank you.
Study it embodied, and also study it on the conceptual level. I think it's very, very deep and precise. You described it very precisely what's going on there, and I like that. So,
Okay.
and it's still a big benefit. Thank you.
Okay.
So I think it's a good moment to close up the evening. Maybe 1.5 hours we have done. And thank you, Will, for sharing your ideas and your work. And thank you to all the people. I mean, it's a very widespread group, and with many different people from different styles. I think they take it out and bring it into the world. So thank you for being here.